E1 on the billboard in Times Square. Imani felt the particular internal adjustment of a person shifting from private to public, the slight gathering of composure, the professional warmth clicking into place. She smiled at the girls. "Hi," she said. "Yes, that's me." The girls erupted. Korean and English mixed together, phones produced a small crowd beginning to accumulate with the speed that crowds accumulate around recognition. Imani handled it the way she always handled it, gracefully, warmly, present for each of them, signing the phone cases and the notebooks that materialized, photographing with an ease that looked effortless because she had trained it into effortlessness years ago. Hyunwoo stood slightly to the side and watched. She was aware of him watching. She was aware in the specific way of someone doing one thing and attending to something else simultaneously, of the quality of his attention. Not the attention of someone observing a stranger, but the attention of someone learning something they had not expected to learn. The crowd thinned after 10 minutes. The girls left happy, phones full, already opening their apps. Imani adjusted her tote bag and turned back to Hyunwoo with a slight exhale of someone stepping back from the public version of themselves. He was looking at her differently. Not badly. Not with any of the things she feared, recognition of the Marcus story, the shift in how people sometimes looked at her when they connected her face to the coverage, the slight recalibration of how they spoke to her once they understood what her life was. None of that. He was looking at her the way you look at someone when you realize that what you thought you knew about them was the surface of something much more layered. "Calvin Klein," he said. "Among others," she said. "Times Square." "For 14 months. She looked at him steadily, waiting for whatever the recalibration would produce. What it produced was, "You handled that beautifully." She blinked. "What?" "The crowd. Those girls." He paused. "That cost you something. The shift from this," he gestured, meaning here, us, the afternoon, the river, the privacy of it, to that. That cost you something and you didn't let it show, and you were completely present for them anyway. She looked at him. Something in her chest did a complicated thing. She stopped. "Try it again." "Thank you." "It's an observation," he said. "Not a compliment." "Can it be both?" The almost smile. "Yes," he said. "I suppose it can." They walked on. The street food vendors had fully set up by now, the smells of tteokbokki and grilled corn and hotteok layering in the evening air. The sky above Myeongdong was going purple dark at the edges, the neon of the storefronts beginning to assert themselves against the dusk. "You knew who I was," Imani said. Not accusingly. Observationally. "I didn't," he said. "At the airport, at the cafe, I genuinely didn't know. I don't follow celebrity news, I know. Your assistant filters it." She paused. "But you knew something. When I mentioned Cha Luxury Group last night, your face did something." He was quiet for a moment. They walked past a vendor selling roasted chestnuts, the smell of them warm and sweet in the autumn air. "I know the company," he said finally. "How well?" A pause that was one beat too long. "Well," he said. She looked at him. He looked at a point somewhere ahead of them on the street. The neon was coming fully alive around them, blues and pinks, and the warm yellow of the food stalls. "Hyunwoo." "Yes." "How well do you know Cha Luxury Group?" He stopped walking. She stopped beside him. Around them, the evening crowd of Myeongdong flowed past, indifferent to the specific stillness of two people on the pavement having a moment that had become unexpectedly significant. He turned to look at her. The neon light caught his face, blue from the left, warm yellow from the right, and his expression was the most unguarded she had seen it, outside of the Han River in the afternoon. "My family has a significant stake in Cha Luxury Group," he said. "The fashion division that hired you, the campaign you are coming to Seoul for, we are principal investors." The pavement held. The neon hummed. The crowd flowed. Imani looked at him. He looked back. Between them, the specific silence of two people who have just discovered that the world is considerably smaller than either of them thought, and that the 48 hours they had told themselves was a separate thing, a between-world thing, a Terminal B at midnight thing, was not, in fact, separate at all. "Oh," she said. "Yes," he said. So, in approximately, she did the mental calculation. 9 days I walk into a Cha Luxury Group meeting and you are potentially present, he said carefully. Yes. She looked at the street, the neon, the crowd, the autumn evening doing its things around them with complete indifference to her internal rearrangement. You should have said something, she said. I know. A pause. I thought about it. At the cafe, when you mentioned the company. I should have said it immediately, and he stopped. Looked at her directly. I didn't want the conversation to change. She looked at him. Why? He held her gaze with the steadiness that was one of his most specific qualities. Because it was the first conversation in a very long time where I was simply a person, he said. Not a name. Not a position.
He paused.
Not a stakeholder. Imani heard this. She heard all of it, the simplicity of the one underneath it, the specific loneliness of a person whose name precedes them everywhere they go, who is never just a person in a conversation, who had driven to an airport and gotten on a plane to Seoul because for 48 hours he wanted to be someone without the weight of what he was. She knew this. She knew it differently, but she knew it. Okay, she said. He looked at her. Okay. I'm not happy about it, she said honestly. But I understand it.
She paused.
And for the record, the conversation already changed just now. So. I know. He held her gaze. I'm sorry. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she looked at the chestnut vendor they had passed, and the roasted smell of them warm in the air, and she said, Buy me chestnuts. A pause. That's it. That's it for now, she said. We'll deal with the rest of it later. He bought the chestnuts. They ate them walking, warm paper bag between them, the evening Seoul crowd flowing around them, and the conversation changed and did not change at the same time, because some things, once they have been said in the right tone, in the right light, with the right kind of honesty, cannot be entirely taken back by new information. He was more than he had said. She was more than he had known. They were still, underneath all of it, two people who had found each other at a charging station at midnight and had spent a day in Seoul that neither of them had planned, and that both of them would carry for a long time. The chestnuts were warm. The evening was cold. The neon of Myeongdong lit them both in blue and gold. That night, over dinner in a restaurant that Hyunwoo chose in Itaewon, a quiet place, dark wood and good wine and food that arrived in careful, considered courses, he told her about the engagement. Not the version he had given by the Han River, the measured, restrained version, but the fuller version. The family expectation. The company merger that the marriage would consolidate. His father's voice at the toast, describing his son's future in the language of business and legacy. The woman, her name was Cha Yoonji. She was 30. She was accomplished and kind and entirely blameless in all of this, who had looked at him across the engagement dinner table with eyes that also contained the specific quiet of someone who had agreed to something out of obligation and had made their peace with it. She doesn't want this either, Imani said. No, he said. I don't believe she does. Have you talked to her? Actually talked to her.
Once.
Very briefly. She said. He paused. She said she hoped we could be comfortable together. Comfortable, Imani repeated. Yes. Not happy. Not in love. Comfortable. Yes. She looked at her wine glass. That's the saddest thing I've heard today. It is a common arrangement in certain. I know it's common, she said. That doesn't make it less sad. She looked at him. You're going to call it off. It was not a question. He looked at her steadily. Yes, he said. When I'm ready to deal with what follows it. He paused. Which is considerable. It always is, she said. Doing the right thing for yourself usually costs something. She thought about the apartment in storage, the forwarding address in Gangnam, the new continent. But the alternative is what? Comfortable. He looked at her. A long, still look, across the dark wood table and the wine and the quiet of the restaurant. No, he said. The alternative is not comfortable. She held his gaze. The restaurant was warm around them. Outside, Seoul at night did its things. She was the one who looked away first. She picked up her wine glass. Tell me about the company, she said. What does the conglomerate actually do? And he told her. Not the careful, abbreviated version of various holdings, but the real version, the hospitality division with its hotels across Asia, the real estate portfolio, the fashion investment arm that included Cha Luxury Group, the technology subsidiary that was newer and more his own than the rest of it, built on his specific vision rather than inherited structure. He talked about it the way people talk about things when they're finally allowed to talk about them honestly, with both the pride and the frustration, the vision and the constraint, the love and the burden of it. She listened the way she always listened, fully, with her whole attention. By the time dinner was done, she knew more about Choi Hyunwoo than she had known about some people she had spent years in the same room with. By the time dinner was done, she suspected he knew this, and was not sorry. The walk back from Itaewon was quiet in the way of two people who have said significant things, and are carrying them. Seoul at night was different from Seoul in the afternoon, darker obviously, but also more itself somehow, the neon sharper, the streets both more populated and more intimate, the city doing what cities do after midnight, which is shed certain pretenses, and become more honestly what they are. They walked side by side. Not too close. The specific distance of two people who are aware of each other's proximity and are navigating it carefully. His phone buzzed.
He looked at it.
Imani did not look at his phone, but she felt the change in him, the slight tightening, the slight withdrawal, the return of the weight that had been, for most of the day, absent. "You should answer it," she said. "It's late." "Hyunwoo. It's been buzzing since last night." He stopped walking. They were on a quiet street somewhere between Itaewon and the hotel, the neon of the main street behind them, the quieter residential dark ahead. He looked at the phone. He answered it. Korean. She stood a few feet away and looked at the street and did not listen, not to the words. She couldn't understand them, but to the tone of it. His voice low and controlled, the voice of a man conducting a difficult conversation with the composure of long practice. A longer pause while someone else spoke. Then his voice again, firmer this time. A short exchange. Then silence. He hung up, stood for a moment with the phone in his hand. "Your father," she said quietly. "Yes." She did not ask what was said. She waited. "He knows I left the dinner," Hyunwoo said. "He has known since last night. He has been patient, by his standards, waiting for me to call."
He paused.
"He is no longer being patient." "What did you say?" He looked at the street. "I said I needed more time." "And he said?" "He said time was not something the situation had a lot of."
He paused.
"He said the Chai family is waiting for a response. That Yoonji's father called him this morning." Imani was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" He turned to look at her. The streetlight was behind him, his face in partial shadow. "I'm going to deal with it," he said. "When I'm back in Seoul properly. When I have had," he stopped. Looked at her with an expression she couldn't entirely read in the partial light. "When I have had these 48 hours. She looked at him. "I need to say something." "Say it." "Today has been." She paused, choosing carefully. "Today has been one of the best days I've had in a very long time. And I want to be honest with you, because I think honesty is the only thing worth being right now." She held his gaze. "But I cannot be a reason for any decision you make. I have been the woman who is someone's supporting character before, and I am done with that role entirely." She paused. "If you call it off because it's right for you. Not because of 48 hours with someone you met at a charging station." He was very still. He looked at her for a long moment. "Is that what you think this is?" he said quietly. 48 hours? "I don't know what this is," she said honestly. "That's my point. We don't know each other." "We don't know each other," he repeated. "And yet." He paused. "When is the last time you felt this known? By someone?" The question landed precisely where he intended it. She felt it land. She did not immediately answer because the honest answer was complicated and the complicated answer was months.
Years.
"Maybe not since I stopped looking clearly at what was in front of me." "That's not," she started. "It's not a manipulation," he said. His voice was very quiet. "I'm not using it to make a point. I'm asking because I want to know. Because the answer matters to me." She looked at him in the partial dark of the Seoul street. At this man she had met at a charging station at midnight who had bought her chestnuts and shown her a 600-year-old palace and told her the truth about his life, with the directness of someone who had run out of reasons to perform. She thought about the Han River and the Hadiak and the restaurant and the dinner where he had finally talked about his company the way people talk about things when they're finally allowed. A long time, she said. The answer is a long time. He nodded. Once. Slowly. Yes, he said quietly. For me also. They stood on the quiet Seoul street, the neon behind them, the residential dark ahead, the cold October air between them carrying the question of what came next. This is dangerous, she said. Yes, he said. For both of us. Yes. I have a job to start in 9 days. With your company's fashion division. I know. And you have a family expecting an answer about an engagement. I know. So, she said. So, he agreed. A long pause. A motorbike went past on the cross street, its headlights sweeping briefly over them. 36 hours left, she said finally. He looked at her. Yes. Let's not waste them being afraid of this. Something moved through his face, slow and warm and decided. Not the almost smile. The full one. The real one that rearranged everything. No, he said. Let's not. They walked back to the hotel side by side. Slightly closer than before. She woke early on the second morning, which had technically become the day of the flight, and lay in the hotel room in the gray pre-dawn light and had a very direct conversation with herself. The conversation went approximately like this. You are a woman who made a plan. The plan was Los Angeles to Seoul, new job, new life, new continent, no complications. The plan did not include a man at a charging station. The plan did not include palaces in the morning light and Han River sunsets and a dinner in Itaewon where someone talked to you like you were worth talking to completely. The plan did not include any of this, and yet here you are, and the question is what you do with here. The answer the conversation produced was not tidy. It was not color-coded. It was, you feel what you feel, and you do not apologize for it, and you also do not make it into something it is not yet, because yet is a word that requires time, and time is the one thing the storm gave you, and is now about to take back. Her flight was at 6 p.m. She had approximately 10 hours. She texted him, breakfast? He replied in under a minute, lobby. 20 minutes. They found a small cafe near the hotel, not the hotel restaurant, both of them, wordlessly, understanding that the hotel restaurant felt too official, too much like a meal that was an ending. The small cafe had mismatched chairs and good coffee and a window looking onto a Seoul street that was waking up slowly, delivery motorbikes and a woman sweeping her shop front, and a man walking a very small dog with the serious energy of someone on an important errand. They ate and talked and did not talk about the flight. He had ordered for both of them in Korean. She had stopped minding this, had in fact begun to find it quietly pleasing, the ease of it, the way he did it without performance, and they ate gyro and toast and drank their coffee and watched Seoul come alive outside the window with the comfortable quiet of people who have moved past the need to fill every moment. I want to tell you something, he said. Tell me. He looked at his coffee cup. Then at her. I called Yunji this morning. Imani went still. Asked if we could meet when I am back in Seoul, he said. Not through our families. Just the two of us. I told her I wanted to be honest with her.
He paused.
She said she had been waiting for someone to be. Imani looked at him. You didn't call it off. Not yet. It's not something I'll do by phone. It requires the proper conversation, face to face, and the conversations with my family that follow it. He held her gaze. But it is done. In the way that decisions are done before they are enacted.
She held this.
The weight of it. The seriousness of what he was describing. Not a gesture, not a dramatic declaration, but the beginning of a real and costly process that would have real consequences for real people. Your father, she said, will be very angry, he said simply. The Chai family will need to be dealt with. Your company. Nothing changes with the company. The merger was business. Business can find another way. He said this with the quiet authority of a man who actually has the power to say it and mean it, which was, she was learning, its own specific kind of thing. She looked at him across the mismatched cafe table. You're sure? I have been sure since a toast at a dinner that described my future in the language of consolidation and felt nothing. He paused. You didn't cause this, Imani. You showed me I was right about what I already felt. She heard the distinction. She held it carefully. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. The cafe window showed Seoul fully awake now, the the street busy, the morning gold beginning to come through the buildings. She looked at it and thought, in 8 hours I will be on a plane to this city. I will live here. I will work here. And he will be here. The thought was complicated. The thought was also, underneath the complication, something that felt very much like something she did not have a name for yet, but that was warm and certain and growing. They spent the last hours doing nothing extraordinary, which was, they were both discovering their specific thing. They walked Buckshin in the morning light, the hanok houses on the hillside orange-roofed against the blue sky, the narrow alleyways quiet this early, and she took photographs on her phone while he stood in archways and pretended not to be being photographed and was obviously being photographed and said nothing about it. They found a small bookshop near Anguk Station where she spent 40 minutes looking at things she couldn't read because the covers were beautiful. He translated the titles of the ones she picked up, a novel about a woman returning to her hometown, a collection of essays about the Han River, a poetry collection by a writer he knew.
Buy the poetry, he said.
I can't read Korean. I'll translate it for you. He said it simply, as if this were a normal thing to say. As if translating a poetry collection implied a future in which he had time and access and proximity to do so. She bought the poetry collection. She did not comment on the implication. She filed it in the same drawer, as we might as well spend them there, and the warm certainty that was growing underneath the complication. They ate one last meal, a small noodle restaurant near the station, the broth deep and clean, the handmade noodles the kind that take years to learn, and they talked about everything and nothing, the way you talk when you are with someone you have found your frequency with, and the frequency does not require topics, just presence. At 4 o'clock, she checked her phone. 2 hours. He saw her check it. I know, he said. I know you know, she said. They paid. She beat him to it this time, definitively, and he accepted this with the expression of a man who is choosing his battles, and walked back toward the hotel through the afternoon streets of Seoul, the city doing its Sunday afternoon thing around them, golden and unhurried. In the hotel lobby, the car to the airport was waiting. Her carry-on was already at the front desk. They stood in the lobby. The marble floor and the high ceilings and the efficient bustle of hotel staff around them, indifferent to the specific gravity of two people saying something that was not goodbye, but was not goodbye either. She looked at him. He looked at her.
Seoul, she said.
Seoul, he agreed. 9 days, she said. The first Cha meeting. I may not be in that meeting, he said carefully. I try to maintain some distance from the day-to-day operations of the fashion division. But you might be. A pause. I might be. She adjusted the strap of her tote bag. She had about 60 things to say, and she said none of them because 60 things was too many and the car was waiting and the flight was at 6 and Seoul was below, and she was going to be in it in approximately 8 hours.
Hyunwoo, she said.
Yes. Thank you. She said it the way she'd said it about the coffee, simply, meaning something larger than the word. He looked at her with the direct, complete attention that was his most specific quality. For what?
For the palace, she said.
For the chestnuts.
For being honest. She paused.
For not knowing who I was. Something moved through his face. Slow and warm. I know who you are now, he said quietly. Yes, she said. You do. The car waited. The lobby hummed. Seoul was outside, and in 8 hours she would be in it properly. She picked up her carry-on. He walked with her to the door. Of course he did. He was that kind of man, and they stood at the entrance of the hotel, with the October Seoul air coming in cold and clean.
Safe flight, he said. Call your father, she said. The corner of his mouth moved.
The full smile. Briefly, completely. Yes, he said. I'll call my father. She got in the car. She did not look back. She was smiling the entire drive to the airport, and when the plane lifted off the Seoul runway and banked over the Han River, and she saw the city from above, glittering and enormous and hers now, she pressed her hand flat against the window and thought, I am going to be okay. More than okay. I am going to be exactly where I am supposed to be. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. A text. I called my father. You were right. It was time.
H.
She looked at it. Looked out at Seoul getting smaller and bigger simultaneously as the plane climbed. She typed back. How did it go? His response, as expected. He will be fine. Eventually. Then, Land safely, Imani. She put the phone in her lap and looked out the window at Seoul and felt, sitting at 30,000 feet above a city she was about to live in, the specific warmth of a woman who has set down something heavy and picked up something she does not yet have a word for, but that is light and certain and growing. The storm was over. The city was below. She was on her way. She had been in Seoul for 9 days, and Seoul had been, in every sense, exactly what she needed it to be. The service apartment in Gangnam was on the 14th floor with a view that made her stand at the window every morning with her coffee and feel, in the uncomplicated way of good views, that the world was large and full and worth showing up for. The Cha Luxury Group team had been welcoming in the warm, efficient way of Korean corporate hospitality, flowers in the apartment on her arrival, a welcome dinner with the marketing team, a week of orientation meetings and creative sessions, and the specific pleasure of being the new person in a room full of people who were genuinely excited to work with her. She had not heard from Hyunwoo in 9 days. She had thought about this, examined it, turned it over, decided it was not a problem. He was dealing with what he had said he would deal with. She was starting what she had come here to start. The 48 hours had been the 48 hours. What came after was what came after, and she was not going to sit in her Gangnam apartment with its 14th floor view, making it into something before it had a chance to become something. She was fine. She was genuinely, substantively fine, the kind of fine that is not a managed performance but an actual state, built from good sleep and good work and morning coffee in front of a Seoul skyline, and the quiet pride of a woman who has started over, and found that the starting over is working. On Thursday morning she dressed for the campaign meeting with the care she brought to all professional appearances, a structured cream blazer over wide-leg caramel trousers, a silk blouse the color of dark honey, her hair in a sleek low bun with the precision of someone who knows what a first impression costs and invests accordingly. Her makeup was architectural and perfect. Her heels were 4 inches of cognac leather. She assessed in the mirror, like exactly what she was, a woman at the beginning of something significant. Deja had texted, "Go get it. Call me after." She texted back, "Always." The Cha Luxury Group boardroom was on the 23rd floor, glass-walled on 2 sides with a Seoul skyline framing everything in the specific way of a building that was designed to remind you where you were. The campaign team was already assembled, Mr. Park, her primary contact, standing with a warm smile, the creative director, a woman in her 40s with an extraordinary eye for composition who had already communicated her vision for the campaign in the pre-meeting briefs, the marketing leads, the styling team. And at the head of the table, in a dark suit that was not Brioni this time, but was equally precise, looking at the same window where the Seoul skyline performed its permanence, was Choi Hyunwoo. He turned when she came in. She stopped for exactly 1/2 second. Then she continued into the room with the composed forward motion of a woman who has had 9 days to consider that this moment was a possibility and has, accordingly, prepared. She was not sure she had prepared adequately. He looked different from the airport, different from the cafe, different from the palace and the river, and the last Seoul morning in the lobby. He looked like himself here, fully, which was the difference. At the airport he had been shedding something. In Seoul's streets he had been in between something, but here, in this boardroom with the skyline behind him, he was what he was completely. Choi Hyunwoo, principal stakeholder of Cha Luxury Group, standing at the head of a boardroom like a man who had been born knowing where the head of the room was. He also looked, which was the more complicated thing, like a man who had spent 9 days dealing with significant things and had come out the other side of them with a different quality about him. Lighter in some specific way, the particular lightness of a person who has put something down. His expression, when she came in, was very carefully composed. Neutral. Professional. Present. She matched it. Exactly. "Good morning," Mr. Park said warmly, coming forward. "Ms. Carter, welcome. We're so glad you're finally here in person." He turned. "I believe you may know our principal investor. Mr. Choi has joined us specifically for this campaign launch. He is very invested in the international expansion." "We've met," Hyunwoo said. His voice was perfectly level. She looked at him across the boardroom. The Seoul skyline behind him. The table full of people between them. "Briefly," she said. Her voice was also perfectly level. A pause of approximately 2 seconds in which the entire room existed in some state of professional normalcy, and underneath it the specific electricity of two people in the same room for the first time in 9 days who had sat by the Han River with their shoes off and eaten hotteok from a paper bag and said true things to each other at midnight in a cafe and on a Seoul street and in a hotel lobby when a car was waiting. "Shall we begin?" the creative director said. They began. Imani worked. This was what she did. This was the bedrock of who she was, the discipline underneath the beauty, the reason she was in this room, and not someone else. She engaged with the campaign brief with complete, focused professionalism, asking the right questions, offering the right insights, the years of experience in the industry making her contributions specific and valuable. She was aware of him across the table the entire time. She was aware in the specific way of someone who has trained awareness into a professional skill, the slight quality of his attention when she spoke, the way he contributed to the meeting with the quiet authority of a man who understands that his most effective move in a room is often restraint. The moment when the creative director described the visual concept for the campaign, and he looked at Imani with an expression that was gone by the time she met it. The meeting lasted 2 hours. It was a good meeting. The kind of meeting where things actually get decided, where the creative vision sharpens in the room rather than blurring, where she left with a specific energized feeling of good work begun. At the end, people gathered their things. Conversations splintered into the warm post-meeting socializing. Mr. Park came to tell her there was a working lunch if she had time. She said she had time. Across the room, she was aware of Hyunwoo having a brief exchange with the creative director, nodding once at something, the director looking pleased. Then the director moved away, and he turned. The room had thinned. Most people had moved toward the door, toward lunch. They were, briefly, in a pocket of relative quiet on opposite sides of the boardroom table. He looked at her. She looked at him. "Ms. Carter," he said. Formally. Correctly. "Mr. Choi," she said. Equally. A pause of approximately 3 seconds. "You look well," he said, in the same formal register. The Seoul skyline behind him doing its significant work. "Thank you." She held his gaze. "You look lighter," she said. Also formally. Also correctly. Something moved in his expression. The window opening. "I feel lighter," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Then the engagement?" "Handled," he said quietly. "As it should have been. Yoonji and I spoke. Her family and mine spoke. It was," he paused, "difficult. And also a relief. For everyone, I think, that had the honesty to admit it." "Your father?" Disappointed. Adjusting. A slight pause. "He is a practical man. He will find another path for the merger." The almost smile briefly. "He is already looking." She absorbed this. "Good," she said. Simply. "Yes." He held her gaze across the boardroom table. The Seoul skyline. The 23rd floor. The professional distance they were both maintaining correctly and completely. "Imani." "Yes." "Would you have dinner with me?" Not a question. An offering, carefully placed. Not as, he gestured at the room, meaning the stakeholder and the campaign face, the professional context. Just dinner. She looked at him. At this man who had shown her the palace in the morning light, and bought her chestnuts and told her the truth at midnight, and called his father. Who was lighter. Who had dealt with what he said he would deal with. She thought about the rule she had made 8 weeks ago in Los Angeles, driving away from an apartment she had emptied. No complications, no men. New life, new city. Forward only. She thought about how rules were the architecture of fear, and how some fears were worth having. And some fears were worth walking through. "Dinner," she said. "Yes." The smile. The full one. It broke through his composure like it always did, sudden, warm, completely rearranging everything. "Tonight," he said. "Tonight," she said. Mr. Park appeared in the doorway. "Shall we go to lunch?" "Yes," they both said at the same time, and did not look at each other because the not looking was its own kind of answer. The dinner was the beginning, which they both knew and neither said out loud because saying it out loud would have made it heavy, and what it was light, the specific, careful lightness of two people who have decided to try something and are moving toward it with the combined caution of people who have both, in their different ways, been hurt by moving too fast. They had dinner at a small restaurant in Hanam-dong that he had chosen, which she was learning was his specific language. Choosing well, choosing carefully, choosing places that told her something about him, without explanation. This one was a Japanese restaurant run by a Korean chef. 8 seats, the food arriving in small perfect courses, the sake served in hand-thrown ceramic cups. They talked about the campaign. They talked about Seoul. He asked about the apartment, and she told him about the view, and he said he knew the building, which of course he did. She was beginning to understand that of course he did was simply part of the texture of Choi Hyunwoo's relationship with Seoul, the city he had grown up in and built things in, and was woven into at every level. They did not talk about the 48 hours directly. It was present between them, a shared reference point, but they were building something from it rather than returning to it, which felt right in the way of things that are moving in the right direction. He walked her home. The night was cold and the streets of Gangnam were bright, and they walked the same way they had walked in Myeongdong, side by side, the specific distance of two people who are aware of each other's proximity and are moving it gradually closer. At the entrance of her building, he said goodnight the way people say goodnight when they are leaving something they would like to stay in.
She said goodnight back.
He did not kiss her. She noted this. She filed it under a man who was being careful, which was, she thought, the right thing to be. What followed was 3 weeks of the specific, complicated, occasionally wonderful thing of trying to begin something real between two people who are also a public figure and a known name in the same city, in the same professional context, against the background of a recently called-off high-profile engagement that had made the Korean business press. The press found out about Yoonji first. As expected, Choi Hyunwoo steps back from engagement to Cha Yoonji was the headline, restrained by Korean business press standards, less restrained in the entertainment coverage that followed. His family put out a brief statement. The Chai family put out a brief statement. Yoonji, to her considerable credit, said nothing publicly, and Hyunwoo told Imani she had texted him something kind and private that he shared. I hope you find what you were looking for. I intend to. Then someone connected the engagement cancellation timeline to the storm over Incheon and the canceled flight and the fact that Choi Hyunwoo had been spotted in Seoul the following day, not at the airport where the delayed flights eventually departed, but in Gyeongbokgung Palace and Myeongdong and Hanam-dong with a woman the grainy phone photographs were not quite clear enough to identify. The grainy phone photographs found Imani's Instagram within a week. Is this new Cha luxury group campaign face Imani Carter with Choi Hyunwoo? Was the energy of the Korean entertainment internet, and then the American entertainment internet, and then the general internet that found any convergence of a Korean billionaire and a high-profile Black American model to be very compelling content. Imani sat with this in her apartment with its 14th floor view and her coffee, and her mother on the phone from Atlanta. Baby, her mother said. I know, Mama. The internet is. I know. Are you alright? She looked out at Seoul. The skyline doing its permanent thing, indifferent and magnificent. She thought about what alright meant now, measured against what it had meant 8 weeks ago when she was standing barefoot in a Los Angeles apartment putting things in boxes. Yes, she said. And meant it entirely. Hyunwoo called that evening. I'm sorry, he said, about the coverage. Don't apologize for the internet, she said. Nobody controls that. I should have anticipated. Hyunwoo. She sat on her couch with her tea. I am a woman who had a very public terrible thing happen and survived it and rebuilt and got on a plane to a new continent. I am not afraid of internet coverage. A pause. No, he said. You're not. She could hear something in his voice, the warmth of it, the specific warmth of a man who is learning someone and finding what he learns to be consistently something. How are you handling it? My agency is handling it, she said. Deja is very good at her job. The Cha team has been professional. Mr. Park sent me a note this morning that was very measured and very kind. She paused. Your father? He called, Hyunwoo said. There was a dry note in his voice that she was learning to recognize. He said if I was going to create a public situation, he wished I had warned him. That's almost funny. He is a man who appreciates order, Hyunwoo said. In its absence, he settles for advance warning. She laughed. The laugh was real and easy and came without management, which was, she noted, what this man consistently produced in her. Hyunwoo, she said. Yes. Are you alright? With all of it. A pause. Longer than she expected. I have been managing expectations and having difficult conversations for 3 weeks, he said. My father, the board, the Chai family, the press office. He paused. And simultaneously he stopped. Trying to what? Trying to be careful, he said quietly. With you. With this. Another pause. I don't want to do this badly, Imani. I don't want to be someone whose life creates a problem for yours. You came here to rebuild something. I don't want to be. Hyunwoo. Yes. You are not Marcus.
A silence.
No, he said. I am not. And I am not the woman I was 8 weeks ago. She said it with the quiet certainty of someone who has done the work and knows it. I know the difference between a complication and a risk worth taking. She could hear his breath.
Steady.
And which am I? She looked out at Seoul. The skyline. The Han River visible from her window in the night. Silver and wide. Come for dinner tomorrow, she said. I'll cook. A pause. You cook. I'm from Atlanta, she said. Of course I cook. The smile. She could hear it. She was learning the texture of it even through a phone. What time? He said.
7, she said.
Don't be late. I am never late, he said.
Good, she said.
Good night, Hyunwoo. Good night, Imani, he said, in the voice that made her name sound like it belonged to him a little. She hung up, looked at Seoul, put her tea down. She was not afraid of any of it. Not the internet, not the coverage, not the complexity. She had been afraid, and then she had gotten on a plane, and then she had met a man at a charging station at midnight, and he had shown her a 600-year-old palace, and she had understood something about the relationship between beautiful things and courage. Some things were worth the complication. Some risks were just the right size. The campaign launched on a Thursday evening in November, which in Seoul meant the city was doing its autumn thing fully. The ginkgo trees along the boulevards a specific brilliant yellow, the air with a sharp, clean cold of a season that means business, the sort of evening that photographs beautifully and knows it. The event was held in a gallery space in Hanamdong that the Cha creative team had transformed into something that looked like a fever dream of old-world luxury meeting the clean lines of contemporary Seoul. She had seen the set design in the brief, and it had been beautiful on paper, and it was more beautiful in reality. Imani arrived at 6 in a dress that was her own choice, which mattered. A deep garnet silk gown with a structured bodice and a skirt that moved like water, her hair up in a complicated, architectural arrangement that her Seoul stylist had spent 2 hours on, and she walked into the gallery with the specific, total confidence of a woman who has stood in many rooms that wanted to define her and has learned, definitively, that she defines herself. The room was full. The Korean fashion press. International guests, buyers, editors, brand partners. The Cha family, represented by the CEO and several board members. And in the corner near the bar, speaking to the creative director with the focused attention that was his specific quality, Choi Hyunwoo in a black suit she registered with the professional section of her brain that never fully went off duty. Very good. He saw her when she came in. She was aware of this the way she was aware of the temperature of a room. Instinctively, without looking directly. She did not go to him. Not first. She worked the room the way she had always worked rooms. The warmth and the attention and the genuine engagement with each conversation. The creative director, Mr. Park, the editor from a major Korean fashion publication, the international press contacts, the Cha family members who were warm and formal and clearly assessing her in the specific way of people who had read the coverage and were measuring the reality against the narrative. She let them assess. She had nothing to hide and nothing to perform. She was simply, completely herself. 40 minutes in, he came to her. Of course he did. He moved through the room with the ease of a man who belongs wherever he is, which in any other man might have been arrogance, but in Hyunwoo was simply the absence of apology, and he came to stand beside her at the edge of the room where she had paused with a glass of champagne, looking at the campaign images mounted on the gallery walls. Her face in Seoul light, the Cha campaign built around the specific beauty of the city and the woman in it. The Han River in the background of one, the Palace Gate in another, the streets of Myeongdong at night in a third. She had not known, when they shot the campaign 2 weeks ago, that those would be the backdrops chosen. She had felt, seeing the finished images for the first time, Something moved through her that was complicated and specific, the intersection of the professional and the personal, the work and the 48 hours, the new life and the man who had shown her the city. "They're beautiful," Hyunwoo said beside her, looking at the images. "The photographer is extraordinary," she said. "Yes."
A pause.
"So, is the subject." She looked at the images. "Professional compliment?" "Observation," he said. "As always." She turned to look at him. He was looking at the images still, the one with the Han River behind her, taken at the exact time of day when the afternoon light goes fully gold, the river silver, the city framing everything. "That one was my idea," he said quietly. She looked at him. "The Han River shot?" "I suggested it to the creative director." He met her gaze. "I told her the light by the river in the afternoon was extraordinary, that it would be the right context for what the campaign was trying to say." She looked at the image. The river. The gold light. The exact angle of afternoon they had sat in with their shoes off eating hotteok and telling each other true things. "Hyunwoo," she said. "Yes." "That was unprofessional, possibly," he said. "I am aware." "I was going to say," she paused. Looked at the image. At the river. At herself in the river light. "I was going to say, it was very like you." He looked at her. Something in his face was very open and very certain. "Yes," he said. It was. Around them, the gallery hummed with the beautiful noise of an event that was working. Conversations, laughter, the clink of champagne glasses, the specific energy of a room full of people who are in the right place. "I want to tell you something," he said. Quietly. For her only. "Tell me." "My father came to Seoul last week," he said. "We had a long conversation. About the company. About the future. He paused. About the idea that a man can build things for himself and also carry his family's legacy. That these things are not mutually exclusive." He paused. "He is not entirely reconciled. But he is trying. Which for him is significant," she said. "Yes." He looked at her steadily. "I told him about you." She went still. "Not the campaign," he said. "Not the business context. I told him about a woman I met at a charging station at midnight whose flight was canceled and who ate hotteok by the Han River and told me the truth when I needed someone to." He paused. He asked if she was the reason for the engagement. "What did you say?" "I said she was the reason I understood I already had won." He held her gaze. He was quiet for a while. And then he said, "Invite her for dinner." Imani looked at him. At this man and his brioni suits and his precise English and his phone full of calls he had chosen not to take and the poetry he read when he needed to think about something else and the smile that rearranged everything and the Han River in the background of her campaign image because he had thought to suggest it. "Your father wants to have dinner with me," she said. "My father wants to assess you thoroughly over an extended meal," he said, with the dry warmth she had learned was his specific kind of humor. "Which is his version of wanting to have dinner with you." She looked at the Han River image. Then at him. "Okay," she said. "Okay to dinner?" "Okay to all of it," she said. "The dinner. The assessment." She paused. "All of it." Something moved through his face. The full warmth of it. The smile that she had spent weeks collecting, in all its versions, the almost, the fraction, the corner, the full one, settling into something that was more than a smile. That was the expression of a man who has made a decision and is living in it. "Imani," he said. "Yes." He reached out and took her hand. In the gallery, in public, with the Korean fashion press and the international editors and the Cha family board members and the creative director and Mr. Park all present, he simply took her hand. Not dramatically. Not as a statement. Just as a fact. She looked at their hands. Then at him. "Public," she said quietly. "Yes," he said. Just as quietly. "Is that all right?" She thought about Los Angeles. The photograph. The internet. The 8 weeks of managing the narrative of her own life. She thought about the woman who had packed her apartment into boxes and said, "Forward only." She thought about what forward only actually meant, what it looked like when you were living it rather than running toward it. It looked like this. A gallery in Hanamdong. A man who had asked her to see Seoul with him and meant it, and had dealt with everything that followed, and was still here. A campaign built around the city she had come to start over in. His hand around hers.
Yes, she said.
It's all right. Around them, someone noticed. The social media posts would follow. The coverage would be what it would be. The internet would have its opinions, and the press would write its headlines, and her mother in Atlanta would call, and Deja would send a tactical plan, and his father would require a dinner, and his board would adjust, and the world would do what the world does with two people who decide to be visible about choosing each other. All of that was true, and none of it mattered. Standing in the gallery with the Han River on the wall behind them and his hand around hers and Seoul doing its things outside in the brilliant yellow autumn night.
Come, he said.
I want to introduce you to the creative director properly. She has ideas for the next campaign. Next campaign, she said. She wants to shoot in Jeju, he said. In the spring. She thinks the light will be extraordinary, Imani said. The smile. The full one. Extraordinary, he agreed. They walked back into the room. Together. His hand in hers, light and certain, the way certain things feel when they are right. Seoul, 6 months later. Spring came to Seoul the way spring always comes, suddenly, as if the city had been waiting for permission, and then all at once everywhere, the cherry blossoms appearing along the streams and boulevards seemingly overnight, the cold air replaced by something that smelled like growth and beginning, the city shaking itself loose from winter with the specific energy of a place that is good at reinvention. Imani had been in Seoul for 6 months. She stood at the window of the apartment. The 14th floor, the view she had loved from the first morning, the Han River visible in the distance now framed by the pale pink of the blossoms on the trees below, with her morning coffee and her fully charged phone and her color-coded calendar that had, in the last 6 months, undergone significant revision. Color 7, she had added. No label yet. She was still deciding what to call the category that covered Sunday mornings when Hyunwoo came over and made coffee the wrong way and she told him so, and he made it the wrong way again because he was precise about some things and stubborn about others, and they ate breakfast at the table by the window with Seoul doing its things below them, and she felt, in her body, the specific warmth of a life that was entirely, completely hers. The campaign had been, by every measure, extraordinary. The Han River images had run in 6 international publications. The Seoul Fashion Week coverage had featured her in 3 separate pieces. Cha Luxury Group had extended her contract for another 2 campaigns, the first of which was the Jeju spring shoot that the creative director had proposed. They had done it last month, the volcanic island in early April, the light exactly as promised. She had walked in Seoul Fashion Week in February, which had been both professional milestone and personal experience, the runway of a city she now lived in, which made it feel different from every other runway, less performance, more statement. Her public profile had rebuilt itself in the way of things that rebuild around truth rather than management, not the same as before, better. The Marcus coverage had not disappeared. It never fully disappeared, but it had been overtaken by new context, new work, new narrative. She was not the woman in the photograph anymore. She was the woman on the Han River. She was the woman in Seoul. Hyunwoo's father had come to dinner in January. She had cooked. He had arrived precisely on time, which she had been told to expect, in a dark suit with the specific posture of a man who does not make informal visits informally. He had looked at her apartment with assessing eyes. He had looked at her with assessing eyes. He had sat at her table and eaten the food she made. She had done her research, had called her Seoul stylist who had grown up in a traditional Korean household and had walked her through every detail, and he had said, midway through the meal, in English that was excellent and formal, "My son tells me you are direct." "I try to be," she said. "He is also direct," his father said. "In this way you are compatible." "I think so," she said. He had looked at her for a long moment. Then at Hyunwoo. Then back at her. The engagement business was, he paused, choosing. Not ideal. No, she agreed. But perhaps necessary. He said this with the slight effortfulness of a man making a concession that does not come easily. Yoonji as well, I understand. She is seeing someone. A professor. Her family seems relieved. Good, Imani said simply. He looked at her again. The assessing look, very like his son's. You are not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? He considered. Someone who would be more careful, he said. Around me. I respect you, she said. That's different from being careful. Something shifted in his face. The Choi family expression, she was learning, the slight softening around the eyes that was their version of being moved. Hyunwoo had it. Apparently, it was inherited. Yes, his father said. It is different.
He picked up his chopsticks.
The food is good, he said, which was, Hyunwoo told her later, the highest form of approval he had available and the exact sentence he used when he meant something larger than the sentence itself. 6 months in, the life she was living was not the life she had planned in Los Angeles, putting things in boxes. It was more complicated and more layered, and more fully inhabited than the clean, ordered, color-coded version she had been building toward. It was also, without qualification, better. She had friends in Seoul. The creative director, Min-ji, who had become someone she had dinner with on weeknights and who had very strong opinions about where to find the best sundae in the city. A photographer she had met at Seoul Fashion Week who was quietly extraordinary. Deja, who had come to visit in March and declared Seoul perfect actually, and started looking at the logistics of opening an Asian office. She talked to her mother every Sunday. Her mother had come to visit in February, had stood at the 14th floor window with her own coffee and said, "This is something, baby. This is really something." And then she had met Hyunwoo and had been very quiet for about 45 minutes, which Imani knew was the processing period, and then had said to Imani in the kitchen while he was talking to her father on the phone in the living room, "He looks at you like you're the answer to something he forgot he was asking." Imani had said, "Mama?" Her mother had said, "I'm just telling you what I see." On a Saturday morning in April, 6 months after a storm over Seoul canceled a flight at LAX and changed 2 people's lives by the particular mechanism of inconvenience, Imani and Hyunwoo walked through Gyeongbokgung Palace in the spring light. The palace in spring was different from the palace in October, the plum blossoms visible over the old walls, the stone warm from the tentative April sun, the mountain behind it wearing its spring green. The morning crowd was larger than it had been in October, but they moved through it with the ease of people who know where they are going. They came to the main courtyard, the broad stone space she had stood in October, and turned slowly in a full circle, and she did it again. Turned slowly. The mountain ahead, the tiered roof of the throne hall, the sky above doing its blue October thing except it was April now and softer, more tentative, the specific blue of a city at the beginning of something. He watched her. He was good at watching her, attentive without being invasive, present without being pressuring, the specific quality of his attention that she had noticed first at a charging station at midnight and had been the consistent thing through all the months and the coverage and the dinners and the complications that she trusted most. "You did this in October," he said. "I know," she said, completing the circle.
"Why?"
"Because it's extraordinary," she said. "I want to feel it every time. I don't want to get used to it." She looked at him. "You should never get used to extraordinary things." He looked at her with the expression she had no single word for, the one that was warm and certain and full of something she had been deciding for 6 months whether to name. "No," he said quietly. "You shouldn't." She looked at the palace, the mountain, the spring sky, the blossoms visible over the old walls. She thought about a Thursday night at LAX and a departures board that changed and a charging outlet with one socket left and the man who was sitting on the other side of it with his 3% battery and his inside-out life, and the 48 hours that had become 6 months that had become a Seoul spring morning in a palace courtyard with the mountain behind them and the blossoms everywhere. "Hyunwoo," she said. "Yes. I'm glad the flight was canceled." He came to stand beside her. Looked at the palace the way she was looking at it, with full attention, the specific respect of someone who understands what they are in the presence of. Then he looked at her. "So am I," he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. The spring light fell on both of them equally. The blossoms did their April things. The mountain held its position with 600 years of practice. He took her hand, the same way he had taken it in the gallery, simply as a fact, without drama or declaration, the way certain things are when they are right. She held it.
"Come," she said.
"I want to show you something. You've been here in October, and I've been here 100 times, he said. "What could you show me?" "The way the light comes through the side gate in the morning," she said. I noticed it in October, and I thought about showing you, and then the car was waiting, and then 9 days, and then the boardroom, and I never." She paused. "Come." He came.
Of course he came.
She had learned, always going to come, not because he had no choice but because he had made one clearly and completely, the way he did everything, in the deliberate and certain and wholly committed manner of a man who had spent 5 years making decisions that were not his own and had decided, finally, to make one that was. She led him through the courtyard toward the side gate. The morning light was coming through it at an angle that turned the stone pale gold, and the blossoms of a plum tree just beyond the wall were visible through the arch, and beyond that the mountain.
He saw it.
She felt him see it. "Yes," he said quietly. "I see it."
"Good," she said.
"Some things deserve to be seen properly." He looked at the light through the gate, then at her. The smile came. The full one, unhurried, entirely his, the one she had been collecting in all its forms since October and had not gotten tired of and did not intend to. "Yes," he said. "They do." Seoul was outside the palace walls doing its spring things, the blossoms and the mountain and the river, and the city layered in everything it was. Imani Carter, who had come to this city with a carry-on and a dying phone, and a broken thing she was in the process of putting down, stood in the morning light of a 600-year-old palace with the man she had found at a charging station at midnight, and felt, in her body and her life and the whole warm certain fact of where she was and who she was with. This is exactly where I am supposed to be. The storm had brought her here. She was not going anywhere. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, leave us a comment. Also like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and click on the notification bell to get notified whenever a new story is made.